We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happening.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. R. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You love this black man!
We ring in 2024 with another edition of Follow the Money, along with Dr. R. Bowen Loftin and Jon Heidtke. I'm Andrew Monaco. Happy New Year to you both. 2023 was something. That's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah,
it was. Somehow we survived, though.
We did. I can say with 100% certainty the three of us are not in the transfer portal.
Who would want us anyway? Come on.
Yeah.
I was going to visit a couple other podcasts and then come back, is what I was going to do.
I wouldn't know how to come back once I visited.
That's right.
Well, Andrew,
as I say that, with the portal, it was absolutely a storyline throughout the entire bowl season as we wrapped up 2023. And it was a storyline as we got into the college football playoff as well. It was an underlying factor throughout the entire postseason, wasn't it?
It was awful in many respects. You may know that Robert Cessna has me and Jon Heidtke as members of his prognostication panel, he calls it. And normally during the season, we're weekly doing predictions of wins. Well, when you do the prediction as far in advance as we did for the bowl games, guess what happened to us? The portal happened. And so the teams I recommended as being winners oftentimes lost many players in the process between the time I made my guesses and the time they were actually playing. And I had the worst record I had the entire season, John. How about you?
You know what? I haven't even checked, but it was so bad I didn't even want to look. So I know it. I think my only win was I picked Washington over Texas.
Well, I picked Texas. So I hate to say that as an Aggie, but I picked Texas to win, thinking they had the right stuff for it.
You mean it wasn't the Commanders I was picking?
Have it. It didn't have it. Yeah, there you go.
You thought it was Commanders Texans? Is that what you thought?
That's what I thought. So yeah.
Good enough.
In previous years, there were seniors who were going to say, I opt out. I'm going to work for the NFL draft. So the next time you would see them on the field might be a Senior Bowl, something like that. But they're working for April. This was completely different this year. Now, we've had trickles of players into the portal. This almost seemed like a tsunami this year, didn't it?
Amen, sir. It varied by team, but I mean, when you have 30 people not playing that were mostly your starters, that changes things a lot. I learned that the hard way.
John, yet the ratings, because of bowl season, better than ever.
Yeah, that was to me the most interesting thing. Even that, because again, that Georgia-Florida State game, I mean, on paper, was such a mismatch. And, you sit there, you just felt so bad for Florida State, who was this close, to being in the Final Four. And then all the, again, just shows you what the world that we live in, all between the portal and the NFL draft, their roster's decimated. I think they're going to have more players available for spring ball than they did for this particular game. But the game, I want to pull up the rating here for that, but the game for that, the Georgia FSU game, it still did over 10 million viewers. It was the third most watched football game in the bowl season behind the two semifinal games. So it was just amazing that game did so well from a bowl standpoint. So, it just shows you that people were listening, people were watching, And again, it was incredible that game that's that big of a number with being such a one-sided game.
We're going to get to whether this can be alleviated when we get to 12 teams, but I want to rewind one more time because I told you guys before, the committee missed on Georgia, not just Florida State, but Georgia. And here's my problem. We don't know what the criteria is for the Final Four. If you say it's the best 4 teams, Georgia's in that 4. Florida State's in that 4. The problem is for Florida State, they did everything that they were supposed to do. They won every game, and it's not enough. And I know some people think it was petulant that they all got out. And hey, that's a kick in the teeth. That's a square kick in the teeth. And then to be clever and say, you know what, the 2 teams that didn't get in, we're going to match them in one of the biggest bowls, the Orange Bowl. Sometimes they're a tad too clever. I get it. I think Florida State's getting kicked while it's down. I see that, and I think it was some incentive for Georgia. I don't know if 12 fixes it. All I know is looking back, the committee was broken. I don't think they ever got it right.
Well, guys, when you put up as a criterion who your starting quarterback is, that's a problem for me. I mean, I don't get it. That seems to be what the chit chat was about in the committee there. Well, they're missing this key player, therefore we can't put them into the Final Four. Like you, Andrew, I can't predict exactly what's going to happen. I do think 12 teams makes it easier. The trouble is we're going to have certain number of teams that are there by virtue of their conference affiliation and their conference success, and that's a variable. And others are getting there sort of on merit. So that's going to be a different kind of world. But 12 teams gives you a lot more flex than 4 does. That's for sure.
I do think this issue would have been resolved with both Georgia and Florida State getting in under a 12-team scenario. I think, again, there's still going to be arguments over who's 12, 13, and 14 probably at the end of the day. But I don't think that's going to have the effect that, again, leaving a Georgia team, which had been number 1 basically all year long, out because they got beat by Alabama in the championship game. So I think those issues will work themselves out. I still think there will be angst over who gets left out on that last slot. But again, just like in the NCAA tournament, you're still talking about the last 4 in, the first 4 out, for basketball at 64. And again, very seldom do those teams, last very long in the tournament, but, it happens every once in a blue moon. So I think, again, for sports, commentating, I think that's going to be, something that they'll still talk about. I don't think it'll raise the degree of ire that this year's omissions certainly caused.
So if we look ahead to 2024, let's say it was 12, instead of FSU being disappointed on being out, they have a home game then at Doak Campbell and one of the playoff games. Yes, you're disappointed you're not getting one of the Final Four. Georgia then plays someone at Sanford Stadium. Good luck to that team that has to go in there. But that will be one of the changes. So it almost ameliorates the disappointment of not being one of the Final Four. That's something that I think is a little fascinating. And Dr. Bowen, you think that also with 12, there may not be as many hopping into the portal?
Well, I think it changes immensely. The portal this year, I think, caused all kinds of problems because it's too new. The way the portal worked this last few weeks is different than it worked before even. And so all of a sudden you have this extraordinarily different way to do business. People believe in themselves. I got that. I understand that perfectly. But at the same time, you've got people whispering in their ears, what to do. And everybody worries about an injury. And we saw that happen in the very first play of the Texas A&M Oklahoma State game. A major injury happened in play 1 that took a promising quarterback out of the picture immediately. Nobody can predict that. I saw that in Colorado a few years ago with a one named King. You may recall that game as well. That happened a little bit later in the game, but not much. And so you have those variables there. I think the portal this year was so different than it's been before. Sure, the NFL draft's been around a long time, and you said it used to be pushed forward. Now it's not. And so we have a bunch of dynamics going on that are not necessarily historic. And I'm hoping we'll see more stability going forward, although with our friends at the NCAA, I'm not sure stability will ever occur when they're around. But I do hope we'll see a better situation than we saw this year because it was such a guesswork, not knowing until right before a game. I mean, in one case, a guy plays half the game and then walks out. Think about
Yes.
that.
Yes.
When's that happened before?
It hasn't.
I just
Unless you've been ejected for targeting.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not something that people voluntarily do, but he did it. I've got to question that kind of person's loyalty, but at the same time, it happened. That was something nobody expected to be in place. So we had lots of things happen in this particular round of bowls that have never happened before. I'm praying it won't be quite so bad in the future because it really blew my record completely out of the water.
It just became personal, John. Because Dr. Bowen had a bad record. That's why we've got to change
Yes,
things.
Think
That's
of the money I lost.
competitiveness in him.
Speaking of money, guys, what do you think, John, about the betting situation this particular bowl season? That was a little different than it's been in the past. I mean, I heard that we had record betting going on. Is that correct?
For the month, the stats that I've seen up through November, but again, as more states have legalized gambling, I think you've seen again that obviously the trend has been going up, and that month to month that the overall handles have gone up. I did not see anything on the collegiate bowl betting. It doesn't surprise me. I'm sure December was a big month for them. I just haven't seen what the final numbers were, but I certainly would think that everything from anecdotally that I've seen was saying that again those games created even more valuable for those states where they have legalized gambling to find other ways to bet on those games, and whatever the micro bets were and the parlays and all those types of things. When you look at what if you do the research on that, it said that basically the number most of the bets are placed in some type of parlay systems, which always favor the house. So, it's just interesting that is still where people are going. But between the marketing of those parlay bets, it's kind of like the lottery. Hey, if you can hit, 3, 4, 6, 12 of these bets, think how much you can win. And again, the ones that get hyped. But again, the other 999,000 that don't, you don't hear about those stories.
Well, I saw Andrew had a nice new shiny maroon Lamborghini in front of his house the other day. So I figured he did it well.
I'm just test driving. That's all it is.
Oh,
Yeah. I think I'm going to keep it, Dr. Bowen. I think I'm going to keep it. One thing I noticed, I think this year, and maybe because of all the factors, I've never seen the line move so much on game days than I have in the past.
Well, some of which was based on who was going to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the thing. I was surprised Vegas was putting lines on some of these games out there. I mean, I don't think you could put a line high enough. I mean, the Georgia game, I think it was 30-something points when it kicked off, and I would have bet that in the half, for the first half that Georgia would have been up by that. So again, crazy things like that were going on. I think again that whole portal system just again, from player rosters to who you were going to competing to. I mean, you remember a couple of years ago during COVID, that was an issue, but this made COVID look like it was a day in the park for some of these teams and some of the rosters that they had right there.
During COVID, your preparation finished when you heard that the other team landed in your college town.
Yeah.
Up until that point, you weren't sure that game was going to be played on a Saturday.
Yeah. So I think, again, one thing they've got to do is figure out, okay, that portal window, having it wide open in the month of December when all these bowl games are being played, they've got to figure out a way to either push that back or, create some value. I mean, I don't think that's hard of a fix, but I think when everybody looked at it this year, the unintended consequences of what that created, guys could play, they could not play, could practice, not practice, depending what they were, and it was just, every school had those issues that they were dealing with right now. So, I don't even know how you get ready for a game in a scenario like that. I don't know if you saw Norvell's speech, the FSU coach at the end of the game, but I thought that was a very powerful testament. Again, what's good about college football, even for those young men that showed up and played in that game, and again, were thoroughly, outmatched and overwhelmed. Again, I think those are still some of the positive things that make you feel good about the future of college football.
And I know that it is a national sport, but all that matters to Coach Norvell is that group in his room. That's who he can affect. He can't affect anything else about that. But those guys in that room, I'm with you. I thought it was powerful as well. Addressing the portals, we look to see and we prognosticate about 2024. Will the portal being addressed, and I think by having all these coaches come out because they're being affected positively and negatively, is that one of many things that you guys can see possibly changing in 2024?
I think it has to change, Andrew. And I'll add a wrinkle to this that may answer the question ultimately. What I've seen over the last couple of years is a very growing likelihood that we're going to allow college athletes to unionize. Well, now that sounds bad, and it is bad in many respects, I think. But one consequence of that, and I want John and you to react to this, one consequence might be that when you have that kind of collective bargaining going on, there are contracts involved now between the players and their union, and the union and the university employing these students and their employees. Now, if I'm writing that contract on one side of the equation, I'm going to be darn sure that I can make those players play. Play not only during the regular season, but at least through the postseason as well. So one fix that could happen through a unionization of college athletics is contractual requirements that show up, that you can't go into the portal, you can't go off, and so I think players understand they have freedom right now in a sense by being able to get NIL money to go to the portal. But if you begin collective bargaining, what's going to happen then? That's going to mean contracts are written and signed and agreed to with great penalties, probably with non-performance. I think we're going to see the potential, if we have unionization occur, that we'll have no problem with this kind of postseason issue because people are under contract now to play. If they don't play, guess what? They don't get paid.
I just have a hard time seeing college athletics being unionized with all of the other issues that are coming with that. I do think there's some ways to get to what your point is. I mean, I saw some of the bowl games said that they would like to have been able to have NIL deals where they're paying players to promote the bowl so they would stay in the game, be part of the game process. I think the portal still is going to be in a situation that I don't know how you address that in a union situation. It's not like people can kind of come and go and leave. If you've got a job offer, if Andrew wanted to go work for the Mavericks versus the Spurs back and forth back in the day, I mean, I just don't know how that world works in this process. So I just don't think unionization is the answer. I do think they're going to certainly try to find ways to monetize the players, incent the players. And from that standpoint, and I think there are better ways to do that than unionization. But I think again that's got to be something that gets worked out at the end of the day, because I think again we always talk about the unintended consequences, on this podcast. And again, by having a unionization, I think the unintended you see so many of the unintended consequences, but I think there are others out there that it really could undermine what's going on out there in that space. So I'm not as bullish on you on that as that is coming, but I do think something has to happen in these players. There will be some type of collective agreement out there, if that's through the collectives, if that's through an NCAA, if that's through government, whatever that looks like. I think there'll be something there that makes this process a little bit easier, because it was truly utterly chaos in this bowl season this year with all the things that were going on. I think everyone understands there's fixes that have to be done, and I think there's some easy places to start.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating unionization at all. I'm simply saying I see things happening that are moving us in that direction. And there are two parts of this. One's litigation. There are actually court cases in litigation right this minute that could result in a judge saying that players have the right to unionize. Put that aside. There are things right in front of the National Labor Relations Board now with a Democratic majority that will go the same direction. So I see unionization not as something I want to see happen. I see something that may be inevitable given litigation and a labor relations board, which is now dominated by people who are very pro-union for everybody. So I see that as a very likely outcome during 2024. It may not be totally done, but I could see a judge making a decision in 2024 saying, students can do that as athletes at a university or college. I can see NRLB finding that this is possible too. Now, that may result in more litigation and more court cases going to the Supreme Court ultimately. It could take 3 or 4 years to work its way out. But I think 2024 will mark a point when we see very concrete steps taken towards unionization, whether we want it to happen or not. I'm not at all in favor of it. I think it's a bad idea. But I say one consequence of doing it is we might see some order brought out of this chaos we just experienced in the bowl season.
It's almost back to the future. This goes back to 2015, where the NLRB basically punted the decision by Northwestern. right? That they never really made a decision. It's almost like they kicked the can.
Well, and that board was mostly Republican in nature. Now we have a very different board. And the board we have now, been appointed by Joe Biden, is a very different board than we had even then. So that board, you said punted, didn't make a firm decision, but even they did not say it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
And now we have a board much more friendly to unionization than we had then. And I don't see any way it's not going to do it. Now, it could still get to the Supreme Court through either pathway or both and result in a decision which destroys the whole idea. But I see us making some really big steps in 2024 towards that kind of outcome, whether we want it or not.
Because of the unintended consequences that you brought up, John, does this force the NCAA to be more proactive than they've been? By being reactive, NIL has gone on the course that it has. They were kind of reactive with the transfer portal, and then litigation made it so, in transferring, you can transfer as many times as possible. Does this overarching organization now have to be proactive than they've been in the past?
Without a doubt. So I just don't know how much, is it too little too late? I think, President Baker has made some strides on this. He's got things out for conversation starters out there, but I think this one be the one that would really get Congress probably involved in it to act on it at some point. I think that would be a catalyst if again, we make predictions, if the NCAA gets sued in 24, my prediction is they won't win any of those cases either. But again, this will be something that the Congress, I think, would finally then, I think, see this as enough chaos going on here that they would have to create some type of a limited antitrust exemptions to get around that world, but at the same time create parameters that are going to guarantee there is some type of a revenue distribution amongst all the players in the sports as well.
My guess for this season is I think we start unwinding what's happened in the last 6 years or so. I think the early signing period will now get adjusted as well. If you want to commit in August, if you're a student athlete, okay, I want to go to this university, I don't have to wait until December. Because think about this, with the portal, early signing period, I think if you want to sign, you can sign. We'll still have a national signing day, but I think the early signing period, I think they've got to kind of unwind that. And I'm with both you guys. I think the portal will be adjusted as well. I think it needs to go after the bowls and then that time, because everything seems to be getting layered. And again, I think it's more of an unwind as it is than applying more rules and making it a little more chaotic.
Yeah, I certainly think, again, even if you have that earlier signing period, which I think, again, I don't see the pitfalls in that at all. But again, if your coach gets fired or leaves for whatever reason, then I think that would allow you to open up. And again, there would be a quid pro quo through that process too. That if the person that you signed with is no longer there, you should have the opportunity to look at other options.
So that 30-day window would be there from the time of the coaching change. Then that window closed. Then you would have another almost window if you don't want to make a decision at that point. I could see that. Again, there's some common sense there.
Yeah.
Big winner in the bowl, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, right?
I love it. I can get that
edible mascots are now where we're going. That I've never seen anything get more play than that. I thought it was fantastic. And that's exactly for bowl games supposed to be fun, right? That was a blast.
Exactly right. Yeah. No, and their social media contacts were 3 times any other bowl out there through that Pop-Tart, the human Pop-Tarts. All the brands are looking at how do they create something like the Pop-Tart mascot. So when I first saw it, it kind of, I used to eat Pop-Tarts as a kid. So it brought back memories there, but it was like, it got to be a little creepy, but hey, people loved it. So
brown sugar, cinnamon, frosted. I just want to go on the record.
Can't beat brown sugar, cinnamon, I'm telling you.
We've roasted pigs. We barbecued bevo. We've done many times the job of actually eating a mascot. Okay, it's happened at least metaphorically, if not really.
Yeah.
But that's what we talked about before. And when we talk with someone like Michael Conradi, the Cotton Bowl, you create all of this for that bowl game, for that area of the country. Then when it's on television, it's fun. People, this is why they want to watch. This is why they want to be in part. This is why bowls are so unique. And I thought it was a uniqueness And again, with the national attention, fantastic. And I think people really got caught up in it. To me,
Yeah.
it was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was like the Duke's Mayo Bowl a couple years ago, and they dumped the mayo on the coach or the player there, and so those things became kind of their own viral moment. And I think again, this edible mascot was something too there. And I think now they've set the bar very high for other brands who get involved in a bowl game now to figure out what kind of creative ways can they work their brand into the context of the telecast or game presentation as well.
Was it Cheez-It Bowl had like a Cheez-It suite at one of the hotels where I think a player or two from each team had stayed. So once again, we're seeing that marriage where we can do this with the players.
Yeah.
As well.
And that's part of the whole NIL deal that I think I said, let's promote them in this environment. But at the same time, by doing that, then that might assure more of these guys. If they're not going to the NFL, this is a way they can kind of keep them in and not having that opt-out period.
Anything else on the horizon, guys, that you can see?
Andrew, you brought up some issues too with the new way we're going to see some distribution of these assets. I mean, I was fascinated by, for example, this is not college but pro, but the NFL is going to go to a streaming venue only for playoffs via Peacock. Now, that's not applying to college, but is that a precursor, John, to what could happen down the road for college?
Absolutely. I think again, one of the things we hadn't talked a lot about, but I think one of my predictions for 2024 will be as the CFP renegotiates their television agreement for a new 12-team environment. They're a little bit, I don't think you'll see them do a 2-year deal. I think there will be some kind of broader deal out there. But I do think, again, that if they do that correctly and do the 12-team deal, put that together, that there's probably a better than 50-50 chance that there may be a streaming partner in that mix that could eventually do similar to what Peacock's doing and have an exclusive one of those early round playoff games being streamed. And I think, again, as you look at that, I think it's also going to we just saw with the NCAA, we haven't talked about it yet either, but one of the other headlines was the NCAA just tripled their deal for all of their championship rights. And I think, again, that the CFP now is probably looking at an environment where I would be surprised if they don't at least triple theirs and go somewhere from the neighborhood of roughly just short south of 500 million now to maybe just north of 2 billion when it's all said and done on an annual basis for their new deal. So again, the broadcasters want it. I mean, Fox has already come out and want to be very aggressive in that. ESPN, I don't think wants to lose this either. Again, just like the NFL, you'll see multiple players in there, and I think again, one of the players will potentially be someone in the streaming service that could have exclusivity for one of those early round games.
Whereas SEC Plus and ACC Plus, if you will, ACCX for their network, Peacock in the Big Ten. College basketball games are exclusively on that streaming format and not on the Big Ten network. So again, it's almost like the trial. John, we talked about it before. It was putting Duke and North Carolina on ESPN2. So you force your cable carrier to get that channel because you didn't want to miss that college basketball game. It was done on purpose. So Dr. Bowen, I see that. I think streaming is a player. And with this college football championship to 12 teams, John, NBC being a player now, CBS, even losing the SEC, but going into the Big Ten, ESPN. When you have multiple players, that drives that money up, doesn't it?
That's right. You always want, when you play musical chairs for rights, you always want to have, 5 guys and 4 chairs. And so I think that's what they're going to have at the end of the day. And those multiple games, I think, will help that process. And again, on the heels of what the NCAA just got for their championship rights, like people see the value. Again, I mean, 28 million people watched, it peaked at 32 million for the Rose Bowl this year. And the weekend did, on the average of the 2 games, were over 22 million. So, I mean, that's a big, big number that broadcasters and even, Amazon streaming in the NFL this year, their Thursday night games have gone up. People are getting more accustomed to it. So, again, yes, there'll be some hue and cry over that for people like me who have a hard time going from cable to Peacock, but we'll eventually figure it out. If we want to.
John, is the real question you're going to be how many people pay? I mean, people don't have Peacock. So if they want to watch this game coming up, NFL game coming up as a playoff, they got to pay per view to be able to see that game. Is that going to be the main driver of decision making, that data from how many people actually pay the price?
I don't think it'll be the end all be all data, but what if you're a Peacock now and you're looking again at what the streaming world's trying to do? The majority of streaming services are very niche oriented, so they don't have the mainstream numbers, if you will. And so what the streaming services are trying to do now, how do they become more broad based in their terms of their the content that they put out there? And again, in the world, if you can go back and forth, I mean, it's not like switching a cable company. That would take a guy had to come out, bring the truck out. It would probably be a week-long ordeal before you got switched over. If you switch streaming services, it's a click of it's a click on the remote. So I think what they're trying to do, if you're Peacock, you're going to want to add sports to your portfolio to help you, be stickiness, is one of the words that they use. So you want to hang on to that. And if NBC's got other great content and movies there, that Peacock becomes one of the services that are part of your streaming bundle, if you will. And so I think that's where sports helps these entities, jump into that place. Again, in Amazon, with what they're trying to do, getting in sports, is help them now sell more product because they've got more people kind of signing up for Amazon Prime, which is really their revenue engine. But realizing now they're in the content business, having this live sports content has helped them grow their base and help them bring new eyeballs to their, to their platform. And those eyeballs they've been able to translate into purchases, which is what their benefit is. So again, it's just, if you go back and look at cable and broadcast back in the late 70s, early 80s, we're going through a similar opportunity here as our viewing habits change. There was a point where more people were ending up watching, probably in the late 80s, more people were watching cable than broadcast television. Last August, more people are now viewing content through streaming services or through smart TVs than they are your traditional broadcast and or cable TV. So that's where the eyeballs are going. It certainly makes sense that the content will follow.
And Peacock's a little bit more set up because the Big Ten, Notre Dame, but also their Major League Baseball. So now you have a reason to keep them all season, as opposed to, I'm going to get it just for college football and then I'm done. And then 8 months later, I'm going to pick it back up again. For Amazon, I love what you just said, the synergy between sports, but also Amazon Prime. Like, that's for the product. So some of these streaming services have different ways to stay sticky, right, John? It may do it. But sports has always been programming in the last couple of decades, right? It's been the one thing where the ratings have actually gone up, where other traditional TV, those numbers have gone down. Sports has been the great programming part. That's why we've seen college football. Most of the big games go to nighttime, things like that.
And despite cord cutting, they still find their way to these games and generate those huge numbers. So again, this was a number, if you look at where the last time ESPN had a number like this, there were probably another 20 million people viewing it on the bundle that aren't there today. And they still had a number there. So people do find it. People will be there again. And that's what creates the value for ESPN or for anybody who would have access to those games.
And for the streaming brand loyalty, and I'm not talking just Amazon. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I'm going to get Peacock. I love the Big Ten and Ohio State. I'm going to make sure that I get Peacock. I must get the SEC network because I want to watch Auburn, things like that. Brand loyalty still matters, doesn't it?
That's all.
College football universities or colleges and universities, that's the loyalty that you have there.
And that's all part of it. And then having that subscription service, more about those customers and what their viewing habits are, which allows you to program more and give them a customizable experience.
My concern right now, guys, is very simple. Right now, I have YouTube TV as my primary vehicle. That gets me all the ESPN family completely, plus a lot of the like SEC Network and ACC and Big Ten. I also get ESPN Plus, separate cost, okay? Now I've got to think about one more thing on top of that. So my only concern is, as a viewer and as a guy with limited income being retired, unlike you two, I have to deal with the fact I've got to afford all these different streaming things. So the issue for me is going to be bundling. How well can people bundle what I want to be able to see? I've been very lucky for a while now. I've had between ESPN Plus and my YouTube TV subscription, I get everything I want in the college space, everything. But now I may have to face another problem, especially if I want to look at the Big Ten beyond the Big Ten Network and look at Peacock. So I'm thinking about how many checks do I have to write every month? Okay, that's my question, guys.
Well, here's the thing that's going on now too that I don't I don't think people realize is that, there's what they call password sharing in the streaming world business, so, my kids all still are on my password. And so they're all in different places now. And I think the streaming services are okay with that for now because it's getting these people exposed to the content. Netflix has already gone through kind of a pass down, crackdown. And all of a sudden now they're trying to get the people who've been watching it, who are shared passwords to sign up for it. And from what I've seen early on, they've had a pretty good success rate in getting those people who had the passwords now to give them some discount or amnesty to get them on overboard to their process, which has caused their stock price to bump up. So I think again that right now password sharing is a big part of that, and I think over time as we all become more accustomed to streaming, and we're willing to pay for certain things out there. What does our budget look like in a streaming environment there? So I do think you'll see some bundles. I do think you'll see some consolidation in the business as time goes on. But I think the players that want to be in it for the long haul realize that if they have some marquee sports properties on their list of offerings, that's going to give them a leg up against their competition who may not have access to live sports or some of the marquee sports events out there.
I think that might be another thing in 2024 is the consolidation. Will Hulu be strong enough, or do they have to go with Warner Brother Discovery? Things like that. I'm just throwing those out there. I'm with you on that consolidation, because can we make it the strongest streaming service to grab all these people? That's going to be fascinating how that's going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's inevitable there'll be some consolidation, but who becomes the winners in that process? I mean, certainly Amazon, Netflix are well out of the gate there, but now do Hulu and Disney do their thing? Does with ESPN, how does that grow? So, does Peacock do something, more with Warner Brothers at the end of the day? So there'll be a lot of, I think, either consolidation or collaboration, if you will, in the industry to try to, again, find out what that magic number is, or what that magic, elixir is to get these people to sign up for those services.
I mean, we certainly hope it keeps happening because it gives us topics for each of our episodes.
Oh, yeah.
There's always something to talk about, isn't it? There's stuff. Really, I just need to put up my phone because Dr. Loftin will send me stuff. Just in December, there's things we didn't even hit from Chip Kelly saying, hey, you know what? College football needs to go to the NFL model. From someone who was a head coach and a GM in the NFL with the Eagles. I thought that was fascinating when he spoke out about all of that. There's some things that kind of trickle in, and I need to be better about catching all of that so I can ask you guys about it.
Well, we have no lack of material, guys, to talk about. The question is, how do we really divide the flavor? You two both mentioned already a very important thing, which is the new NCAA contract. Can you all elaborate a bit on the actual details of this? How much money's involved? And how does this affect not only the NCAA, but also the schools whose teams play in the tournament?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that. I mean, I think what's interesting there is that the NCAA had a window where they could, a negotiating window. And so even ESPN is the incumbent, so they usually have a period of time to negotiate with them on that process. And if you may remember back last spring, maybe it was 2 springs ago, when there was the video that came out on here's the men's tournament and the women's. I think we're in San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken, and their workout facility, the videos were just, look like my old high school gym versus what the men were being able to work out with. And that created a lot of hue and cry amongst, again, the inequities about the men's versus the women's tournament. And so I think that got everybody looking at the process. And then they said, all right, if we were to take the women's, piece out of the NCAA championship rights package, which is roughly 40 events, how does that look? And so, you saw some numbers, or at least I saw some numbers way back in the day that said, hey, if you did the basketball alone, women's basketball alone could be worth anywhere between 80 to 115 million of what that deal could be on just an annual basis just for women's. And to put that in perspective, the current deal was, I think, roughly $35 million a year for that particular package. So all of a sudden, you have that tsunami coming. Then you have the Caitlin Clark, LSU, almost 10 million viewers watching the women's tournament last year. There's a renaissance in women's sports out there. So that puts more valuable on it. So I think, again, the NCAA had a really hot property there. And so, ESPN already had all those rights. I don't think they wanted to lose it. And so they were able to, this new deal just comes out the other day. And so they almost triple their deal. It's over 300% increase. And now it's 115 million a year for all of those rights over the next 8 years. And what that's going to do is they basically identified within that window that the women's basketball tournament is somewhere in the neighborhood of $65 million for that, little over 50% of the overall package for the women's tournament. That I do now think a couple of things from that is, one, by putting that number out there, that value there, that's something then that they could then put that money and create revenue distribution units like they do for the men's tournament, which I think you will see happen in those conferences whose members now participate and win and advance in the tournament will get these units similar to what the NCAA men's teams have. So I think that's a really positive benefit. The other interesting thing about this deal is it keeps them on ESPN. So being, again, Sports Center numbers are going up, all the different things out there. I was watching last night, and already I saw on the ticker there was a lot more women's basketball scores on the ticker than they have been in any other given day. So the promotion of that via the ESPN, networks that they have opportunity there is additional value that the NCAA is going to get there. It's a partner that they've worked with. So again, anytime I think you can stay with the people that you know and work with, and they do provide you a significant rights increase, that's a win-win for both sides there. Could they have made a little bit more money if they took it out to the open market? Possibly, but then they lose a lot of those intangible benefits by having ESPN packaging all those other events and the promotions that they do for women's volleyball, et cetera. And in this deal, too, they've agreed to a certain number of the championship events are going to be on ABC, which is their broadcast linear network. So there, again, we saw women's basketball last year, women's volleyball, women's gymnastics are going to be part of that process. Even the FCS football championship playoffs, I think they'll be part of that mix. So that's the winner for them, too. But I think the one huge piece of this deal is that it is concurrent with what the men's basketball package does. It will conclude when it concludes. So now the next time the NCAA can go out to market, they will have the benefit of both the men's basketball package and all these other championships out there as well, which could be a game changer for them because, again, who knows what the marketplace is going to be like that. The content that all that will provide for streamers who, as the world continues to evolve in the next 8 years, who knows what that's going to look like. But I think we can certainly say streaming isn't going anywhere. It's only going to increase. It really gives them an excellent opportunity to be in front of that. And that deal also ends before both the SEC deal does too. So again, there's going to be an opportunity for them to, I think, really put themselves in a very good position. It's hard to guess what's going to happen 8 years from now, but I do think it puts them in a very good negotiating position for the next time their rights come up and all of the assets that they can bring to the table on this, assuming they can fix a lot of these other issues during that time period to continue to keep college athletics at the trend that it's going at right now.
And because we're still viewers as creatures of habit, it's my favorite sports championship is on ESPN. Yeah, that's powerful for ESPN as well, and for the NCAA, to be honest with you.
No, and it's 2,300 hours a year that they've got, of events that they can put out there. So that's very positive too. I mean, those are again in the collegiate space and how they market it. It's only going to get bigger and better for them. And as ESPN puts more, promotional and marketing muscle behind that deal.
The other thing I think that is bubbling under right now. Will the ACC keep its grant of rights, and how is all that going to be? Because there is, let's see, unfavorability going on with those schools after what happened in the college football. It's not just Florida State. And with that grant of rights through 2036 for that conference, and that's how they get the ACC network. I think that one's bubbling under that will keep popping up to the surface as we go out through this season.
No doubt, Andrew. And FSU has already been the leader here in terms of going into the legal realm. They've now begun litigation processes that could ultimately get a decision made that they could drop out of this agreement. They're claiming basically that the deal is so bad for them and other members of the ACC that needs to be abrogated. So I think it's likely we're going to see litigation get into a very, very high gear this year, 2024. That could lead to, if not one school leaving the ACC world, it could lead maybe to the entire renegotiation, if you will, of their rights agreement. It was a bad deal. I understand why it was done, but the length of time they put into it is what's extraordinary. And what you've seen is, in most cases, a stabilization or even a shrinkage of the length of these rights agreements. So I think that is the future going in 2024. Now we'll be looking for, and we'll see some real steps forward this year that could lead to a very big change for at least the ACC, if not one of its schools.
And if there's change there, that means it's going to change for the other conferences too. If there's subtraction, there's usually addition somewhere else.
Had FSU won that game with Georgia, it might be a little bit more aggressive right now. It will be. But nonetheless, FSU has a good product to put out there. And I think they are very, very worried about their constraints right now financially compared to what the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be able to do. So, John, what do you see about the SEC future contract changes? Do you see some things happening this year that might impinge on that?
Well, the only thing I think it's going to really impact their, the deal. I think they've got the Texas-Oklahoma piece worked in. There's still some issues over the eight or nine conference football games, which I think they'll get that worked out, this next, for this round. But I think, again, for them, those are kind of minor tweaks at the end of the deal. I mean, the significant ones would be, all right, all of a sudden, if let's just say Fox goes on and puts a major bid for the CFP. All right, now they've got the Big Ten and they have the Big Ten and the Big 12. Would they be interested in something, if there was another, configuration of those schools wanting to come in there? Probably. So I think, again, ESPN is going to be in the same boat. So even though nobody wants to say it right now, and from that standpoint, I do think there's a lot of valuable assets in the ACC that could find homes in both of those two conferences and enhance their probably opportunities to make their revenue distribution conversation stronger. So I just think, again, it's inevitable when that happens. And I certainly think that's Florida State's end game, if they do this. And I think there are other schools who may not be as vocally, publicly about it as they are, but probably behind the scenes are having their lawyers look at similar opportunities. And how do they figure out a way to try to, again, mitigate those potential damages if they do want to go and find, a new conference affiliation at the end of the day. And again, as you look at the SEC and you look at the Big Ten, those two seem the most logical place where, if you're going to build the NFL model, they've still got more rooms to go to build that model. And I think space is within that, with those conferences to do that. So I just think, again, it's just inevitable when that happens. And I think, again, how soon does Florida State, wait, does Clemson want to come along with them? Does North Carolina want to come along with them? Who knows? But I think everybody's watching, particularly with ACC ties, to see how this all plays out.
Fascinating. That's the word I keep using. I find it absolutely fascinating. Which means our next episode is going to be fascinating, as this one was. Thank you so much, guys. Absolutely appreciate it. Again, Happy New Year to you both.
Same to you, Andrew.
For Dr. Bowen, for Jon Heidtke, for our producer Dalton Hughes, I'm Andrew Monaco. This has been Follow the Money. We'll see you next time.